To those who watch part 2, welcome back. To the newcomers, welcome. Let's continue part 2 of the media provocation and the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. Press freedom, like so many other so-called fundamental democratic rights, has often not applied to the black community. Some papers condemn the destruction of the black community, but in Tulsa, the city's politicians and the white-owned daily newspapers blamed the black community for the massacre and framed it as a Negro uprising against the white community. Smitherman, the Tulsa Star publisher, fled the state after false charges were brought against him and other prominent black residents for causing the riot. Jesus Christ. The Tulsa World reported that Tulsa Mayor T.D. Evans said that black people were to blame for the massacre, which he described as inevitable. He argued that it was good that the destruction of Greenwood happened. Let the blame for this Negro uprising lie right where it belongs, on those armed Negroes and their followers who started this trouble and who instigated it, and any person who seeks to put half the blame on the white people are wrong and should be told so in no uncertain language. It is the judgment of many wise heads in Tulsa, based upon observation of a number of years, that this uprising was inevitable. If that be true and this judgment had to come upon us, then I say it was good generalship to let the destruction come to that section where the trouble was hatched up, put in motion, and where it had its inception. Meanwhile, Tulsa World also blamed the massacre on the black community in its June 4th editorial. There are those of the colored race who boast of being bad. These it was, seizing the merest semblance of an excuse, who armed themselves and invading the business district of the city defiantly sought to take the law into their hands. If possible, harmony between the races is to be restored in Tulsa. These bad must be controlled by their own kind. The innocent, hard-working, colored element of Tulsa faces both a danger and an unescapable duty if the work of those who seek to restore and tranquilize is to accomplish anything. They must cooperate fully with They must cooperate fully and with vast enthusiasm. Oh my God. They must cooperate fully and with vast enthusiasm with the officers of the city and county in ridding the community of worthless, boasting, criminal bad. If this wasn't documented, I wouldn't believe it. It sounds like a bad, terrible B movie. In the second editorial, the paper also called on black Tulsans to protect themselves against worthless Negroes. The time is here for the colored citizens of the city who work for their living and render a substantial service to the community to band themselves together for their own protection against this element of non-working, worthless Negroes. The editorial also warned the black community to reject leaders who fought for equality, since it would never be realized. School yourselves to become an attitude in your associations. Exert yourselves to bring to justice criminals and law violators of your own color. Be respectful. You have leaders of your own race who are safe and sane. Hear them. Avoid the boasting intriguers who prate to you of race equality. There has never been such a thing in the history of the world, nor will there ever be. In the World's June 5th editorial, in the work there is salvation. In the World's June 5th editorial, the headline was, "In work there is salvation." The paper supported the mayor's cruel threat to arrest Tulsans who were not cleaning up the destruction caused by the massacre, a threat that clearly targeted the city's black residents. The world called for black residents to be scourged if they didn't cooperate. God, Jesus. The worthless, shiftless blacks who refuse to work should be made to work. Apparent tendency on the part of some of them to sit back and ease because of decent efforts of the citizenship to undo that which has been done should and must be met with an iron hand. Tulsa wants no shiftless idle class, either white or black. The time has come when our stables must be cleaned. And in the cleaning, no color line should or can in common justice be observed. The shiftless criminal element must be either reformed or driven for the city. Tulsa must be purged. The splendid citizenship of the city is contributing of its substance for a cause considered worthy. And if men of color seek to take advantage of the splendid outbursts of sympathy instead of cooperating with it and proving their worthiness of it, they should be scourged. Tulsa, as it is functioning now, is not demonstrating in behalf of worthless, silk-shirted, and impudent colored men, but demonstrating in behalf of innocent women and children and hard-working colored people who is fondly believed gave no offense and contemplate no offense. Meanwhile, the Tulsa Tribune advocated against the rebuilding of Greenwood in a June 4th editorial. It must not be again was the headline. I'm going to intentionally leave out the N-word that they so freely used back in those days and still do in private, and blame bad ends for starting a riot. Such a district as the old N-Town must never be allowed in Tulsa again. It was a cesspool of iniquity and corruption. In this old N-Town were a lot of bad ends, and a bad end is about the lowest thing that walks on 2 feet. They were no lower than the peoples that destroyed a whole black community for doing nothing. Now back to the article. Give a bad end his booze and his dopes and a gun, and he thinks he can shoot up the world. No, that's what you guys thought. Back to the article. And all these things were to be found in N-Town: booze, dope, bad ends, and guns. The editorial also blamed the police commissioner for failing to deal with the growing agitation in N-Town. Well, the bad ends started it. The public would now like to know, why wasn't it prevented? Why were these ends not made to feel the force of the law and made to respect the law? Why were not the violators of the law in N-Town arrested? Why were they allowed to go on in many ways defying the law? Why? They should have turned around and answered that question for themselves. In this June 5th editorial, the Tribune called for building back a city that was nobler. The piece used racist epithets and a historical racist framing of black criminality to claim that black residents had plotted a violent attack on the white community. There, most of the criminal of the community, both white and black, found harbor. Their crimes were plotted. There are an uprising has long been in process of planning. There has disorder begun. The bad elements among the Negroes, long plotting and planning and collecting guns and ammunition, brought this upon Tulsa just as the winds gather into a cyclone and sweep upon the city. This bad element among the Negroes must learn this is not a city of, for, and by their kind, never. Tulsa will redeem her splendid name before the world. The Argonaut days of Tulsa are history. The inner city with a nobler and truer spirit and an awakened conscience is the aftermath of this disaster. No one was ever held responsible for the murders committed during the massacre or for the destruction of Greenwood. Instead, the public and private institutions in Tulsa tried to erase the massacre from public consciousness. The Tribune didn't even mention the massacre in its paper until 1971. The bottom line is that for half a century, the white newspapers of Tulsa intentionally kept the massacre buried, said author and historian Scott Ellsworth, whose books and other writings have played a critical role in ensuring that Tulsa reckons with its history. In fact, the microfilm for the Tulsa Tribune May 31st, 1991 issue is missing both the news story about Rowland's arrest with the headline, "Nab, Negro for attacking girl in elevator," and the editorial that predicted a lynching that evening. Both the article and the editorial were intentionally removed. But in 1946, a college student working on a thesis about the massacre found a copy of Rowland's arrest article. The editorial, however, remains missing. In his book, Madigan writes that the editorial had appeared in the paper's initial run, but Tribune staffers convinced Jones to remove it from additional editions that were printed that day and attempted to remove copies of the paper featuring the editorial predicting a lynching that night. In 1971, dozens of survivors took part in a small commemorative ceremony at Mount Zion Baptist Church. As the commission noted, the event represented the first public acknowledgement of the massacre in decades. That same year, the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce asked Ed Willer, a white man and host of a local radio program, to write an article about the massacre for his magazine. But white men, strangers, subsequently approached Willer and warned him not to write the article. In addition, someone used soap to write a message on his car windshield that read, "Best check under your hood from now on." But Willer kept on. A 2020 Los Angeles Times profile of the paper noted that every Thursday for decades, through editorials, news stories, and photos, the Eagle has forced the city to confront its violent past. The paper also publishes editorials every year on the massacre's anniversary, calling on lawmakers to remember what happened. But while the black community continues to fight for justice and reparations, the story of what happened in Tulsa remains a threat to our nation's white racial hierarchy. The right wing has adopted the framing of cancel culture as a strategy to prevent accountability, including addressing our nation's history of anti-black racism and the harms inflicted on the black community. This dark, vile past has been reported countless times since after the hateful tragedy has been exposed or re-exposed. But if you look how major news media still report news today concerning Black America, not much has changed, albeit they try to conceal their biasness due to being called out. But if they were never called out and hardcore racists didn't have to retreat underground, I have no doubt that the media would still go out their way to continue to brutally stigmatize Black America in the most disgusting, disturbing way. But they wouldn't see it as disgusting or disturbing because that is their way of life when it comes to those called Black Americans. It's only a matter of time before the harvest from all those diabolical seeds are fully bloomed. When it's time to reap those seeds, what's sad and very conceivable is the same ones who arrogantly refuse to show compassion and mercy will be the ones who beg for it when the tables turn, and trust, they are turning now. Thanks for watching.